documents, and they simply don't carry enough paper to be down that long. So that's sort of the landscape that I walked into, hearing about these things, seeing them, and then knowing we had a massive decision looming. And so we had to think about how best to secure an organization in the context of a massive decision. So I'll be talking about that here shortly. And thinking just a little bit about what our IT posture looked like during that period of time. So we were on premise, so 95% of the systems, the services, so forth, the data were within the hospital's data center walls. So think about multiple EMRs, so electronic medical records, data stores, business intelligence tools, all those things within our walls, and a tiny little IT security team to protect them, relatively speaking. So I had a team of about 160 at that point. It ballooned up to about 250 during the Epic go live or deployment, about 160, but only really about 5 focused in security, including a security director. So that's not a lot of folks. That's nowhere near what a Microsoft or an Amazon or an Epic vendor can staff. They've got armies of these folks to help protect your system. So that was what we looked like at the time. All right, hopefully you all recognize this. I hope you had the chance to play Battleship. I grew up playing it, and it felt a lot like Battleship to me. So if you haven't played this, you call out a position on the board, and you're trying to drop the bombs on your opponent's ships, and then they're doing the same. And this is what it felt like. We had these risky systems. They were on premise. The news articles are all talking about these health systems that were getting ransomware, massive attacks. So it felt like these bombs were falling all around our ship, and we were taking a hit or two, but we'd not yet sunk. So we'd had affiliates, so partners that we shared data with, that had in fact been hit and sunk. We'd had some relatively, compared to ransomware, relatively minor security incidents during that time. So we knew these things were hitting and happening, but we'd not been sunk yet. So that really went into the context of how we looked at our systems. All right, so I want to go back prior to that photo of the CEO and I sitting there with him signing the contract for Epic, and talk about what it looked like when I joined the organization. So the organization had run into a problem where one of their key systems was going end of life or sunsetting, and so they needed to move. The current position was not tenable. It was not, you couldn't just stay there because the system would no longer be supported, and they had to move. So they had already been to the board of directors and went with option A here, which is to just do as minor upgrades as possible to one of the systems. They went with option B, which is to go as minor as possible and just make the minimum upgrades or new systems brought in to shore up that one system that needed to go live. The other option they looked at, but the board ended up going with option B, was to go all in with Cerner. So that Cerner was the electronic medical record that they were on, and they said, okay, this is our opportunity to really up-level all our tools. And so when I got there, again, the executive team had been to the board and said, we're going on to Cerner. That's the choice that's made, we back it. And so I started to wonder, well, are those the only two options? Are they the best options? Was there a third? And so spent a lot of time opening back up the analysis, asking a ton of questions. I had a lot of skepticism that the choice that was made was the right one. And I had to think about how to navigate that, given that the board had already worked with my leadership team, my colleagues, and said, we had already said that option B was the best decision. Well, we ended up doing a U-turn after the analysis, even though the board had already approved it, went back and looked at going all in on Epic. And so we had to really go back, evaluate that decision, and look at a number of factors, which I'll talk about. All right, so thinking about making a massive decision like this, and you remember the figure I gave, so this ended up being an $81 million initiative, which is just, even for this size organization, it was pretty massive. So when you all think about these things and approach these in your careers, there are ways that I found successful to go about those sorts of things. And a pretty intuitive one is to go look at rating agencies or groups, find independent groups, the Gartners of the world, Class, and so forth, just like if you were car shopping. So if you're looking for an automobile, you might read Motor Trend or Car and Driver and look at how is this Tesla Model X rated versus this Toyota, Camry. And so to look at those objective ratings. And when we looked at that, we could see that Epic was rated so much higher. And we sort of knew that internally, but we thought, okay, it's better, but it's so much more expensive that doesn't matter. We can't afford it. Another thing when evaluating systems, so if you move into a security role and you have to go figure out, hey, let's go replace the firewalls, let's go make a business case to deploy a pretty expensive system, intrusion prevention, you want to figure out, you don't want to go make a recommendation of a product that the industry is moving away from. And I've seen that in my career a number of times where folks have just gone live on something that everybody else is getting off of. That's generally not good. And so we pulled the numbers. We found that 104 of the new clients moving on to EMRs, or the transitions, had chosen to go on to Epic, and only 3 had left Epic. Well, Cerner, the path we were going, 59 had moved off of Cerner, and 59 of 59 had all moved to Epic. So this was a little bit worrisome, thinking about the fact that we were going to invest heavily in Cerner when the industry was moving away from it. All right, for us, this might be a little more unique to the healthcare space, but it's important to have similar systems within the U.S. Unfortunately, the health information exchanges, the data exchanges to help continuity of care aren't as top-notch as we would like, but you get synergy with other health systems that are running on similar systems. So Epic to Epic works very well from an HIE standpoint. So it's really going and saying, okay, we're in the Seattle area, what are folks on around us? And it turned out nearly everybody was on Epic. So this gave us a lot better interoperability with our colleagues. So why don't I pause there for a minute? I haven't seen any questions come through. What questions do folks have so far?
Anybody have any questions? I guess just looking at this, how much more expensive was Epic than Cerner? You said Epic was like 81 million, right? So how much was Cerner, like 5 million?
Oh, yeah. So that's a great question, and cost is critical to procuring a system, whether it's security or an EMR. So let me, if that's your only one, I'll hit that in just a moment when we get to that slide.
Okay, great.
Yeah, any others? All right, let's keep rolling then. So, okay, and then another key one in healthcare, thinking about the nurses live on these systems, the physicians live on these systems. So understanding, survey your users. So if you're going, something you're not going to ask a user at work, hey, which firewall do you want us to go to? Some of those types of things are less relevant, but where you're looking to implement key systems, maybe if you're in the finance space or on Oracle Financials or other, try to understand what does your user base want to do. and especially where they're touching the systems on a daily basis. So we did a number of surveys to dig into that as well. All right, so looking at costs. So Josh had asked the question around costs. So I want to dig into this a bit. So Cerner. So when I cite the $81 million, that is capital and operating expense relative to the project go live. So this, what we're looking at, is your total cost of ownership over a period of time. We were looking at, initially, the leadership team before me, the board, just looked at that price, that $81 million, and kind of wiped their forehead and said, no, that's too rich for us, we're not even going to touch it. The smaller Cerner option would have been about $20 million, so $61 million less. But whether you're looking at security technology, whether you're looking at buying a house or a stock or things like that, it's not always the price you pay. You want to understand other things, like what are the total costs. So looking in, when we sort of took a look back and looked at our 10-year total cost, so essentially, what would our total expenditures all in be? So what would our new operating budget look like on Epic, including all those costs? What would the various options look like? And so when we took a step back and looked at those, it turns out Epic wasn't all that much more expensive. So you can see over 10 years, it was only about, what was that, 573, about $30 million more than the Cerner all-in option. And I say only about $30 million. $30 million is a big deal, but we're going to talk a little bit about the revenue side here in a moment. So that was the big shift. And that's important because when you think about these big projects like this, you don't rustle around in your pocket to see how much money you've got in there to go purchase the software, or you're not looking in the cash register to see how much. You're financing these things. So you're we took out a bond, which is the payback period on those can be 10, 15, or 20 years. So it doesn't, yes, Epic can be very expensive, but you're not just taking money out of the till, so to speak, and paying for it right there. You're capitalizing it. You're taking out a loan, a bond to cover that. So it's really, you want to take a step back and not just look at that huge difference in initial payment, but more importantly, you're helping to run a company. So what are the company's expenditures look like over a period of time? And you can see they weren't all that drastic over time here.
All right. Could you just maybe continue on and maybe backtrack to maybe when you were, with Coalfire, and what were some of the cost things when you had to deal with at a lower level or a more technical level?
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I had these. We purchased services the last week where I've signed off on invoices. I've sat down with my CISO or some of my directors and evaluated these. And this is obviously, I really want folks to start to look at, step out, if you're not in the CISO role, CIO role, just start thinking about what's out there, what are those roles, how are they approaching these massive decisions, and then how am I going to take little nuggets from that and think about those as I'm purchasing the next thing in the next week or where I'm looking at. But yeah, definitely, we signed up. So actually, while I was at Evergreen Health, we ended up going with Arctic Wolf, which is a security operations center service. So it's essentially if you're familiar with Arctic Wolf, so they're your SOC. They're going to monitor logs. They're going to look breach detection, take remediation efforts based on your agreements and things like that. So smaller scale but similar approach. So I sit down with my security leadership team, my infrastructure leadership team, and when we evaluate that, it's sort of the same stuff. So, take the numbers away, we're having those same discussions. What is it? Who are these Arctic Wolf folks? Are they going to be here tomorrow? Okay, yeah, the price looks a little different from the other vendor you're showing me, today's price, but what are they going to cost next year? What is the total cost of ownership? So I don't care if Arctic Wolf is $8 cheaper this year if their maintenance is going to be 3 times higher forever. So exact same principles. It's what's out there, where is the industry heading, what is the total cost of ownership, tell me, why do you think Arctic Wolf is the better product? Where is the objective ratings that say we should go with this one versus that? So hopefully that, these things might seem a little abstract, some maybe big numbers or different. Maybe you're saying, I'm never going to implement an EMR, but this stuff can be, I will apply this stuff tomorrow when I go into work, when I get asked for a purchase request. Does that help, Josh?
Yep, great.
Okay, and similar, so sometimes when you're at coal fire, if I was buying an intrusion protection device, a firewall, east-west firewalls, things like that, there wasn't always revenue attached to it. But in this case, the thing that just, I showed you that image of the U-turn, and that U-turn decision that we made was right here on this slide. So for years, the organization had thought about going to Epic, but looked at it and said, the price is too high. Well, what they didn't look at is Epic is rated so much better than the other systems. And key to that is a system called your revenue cycle system, where you route every charge in the company. So if you have $1 billion health system like we were, every one of those $1 billion routes through Epic, or it routes through Cerner if you stay on it. Well, when you go to a level 5 rated revenue cycle system versus a level 2 revenue cycle system, those ratings are about which one's prettier. They're rated a number of things like usability, but also effectiveness. So when we modeled and looked at Moody's data, so objective external data sets, we found that groups that moved on to Epic, they had increased their operating margins by 41%. And so right there, that was the 180. So when I brought my analysis forward with this, showing this item here along with the cost, we kind of hit the brakes and we said, okay, that my leadership team, my colleagues clearly understood we need to do a 180, but we had already told the board of directors we were going the other way. So he set up an interview. Basically, I call it the Oprah interview, which if anyone's seen that show, you got Oprah sits on there and then you sit on the couch, maybe crying and get interviewed. Well, we had our chief operating officer sat me down in front of the board in this stadium seating style conference room, just me and him, 2 chairs in the front, and then the board seated all around. And this is the board that we already told we were going the other direction. So we talked for about an hour and a half. He asked me questions. I relayed all these facts. The board started asking me a lot of questions. And at the end of that hour and a half, I walked out the door, started walking down to my office, and was thinking to myself, I have no idea how that went. Like the board's face, they don't change their expressions. You can't really tell. It's good questions. So I walked all the way down the other side of the hospital. On the way back, the chief operating officer texted me and said, you just got $81 million, and a little thumbs up emoji. So, we made a pretty powerful case, and they decided on the spot to change directions. All right, so thinking back, a little bit of what I just talked about. So recurring operating costs. So this is another one, and this, whether you're buying a firewall, an IPS, a SOC, a new encryption in transit vendor, encryption at rest, what are the things you look at? And it's imperative when you get into a role and you need to think long term and understand what are the reoccurring operating costs, and not just the ones. So if you buy an item and it's got a 1-year contract on it, you can't just think about what is the 1-year cost, because once you go through the effort of getting products in or subscribing to services, the vendors know that's a real pain in the rear to go through that effort, and so they're going to attempt to raise your long-term costs up on you. So if you go onto a SOC, a Security Operations Center, you don't want to go change just because they raise their price 8% and the other vendor might only have a 5% increase. You have other stuff to do. It's kind of hard to just go change systems all the time. So you're kind of pinned in. So you need to be able to lock in your costs, or at least forecast which vendors habitually lock in higher expenses, whether it be, again, security software, hardware, what have you. So I know Josh talked about, you guys have been very focused in encryption. There are a lot of great vendors out there, whether it be email encryption, data encryption. There are some that are great. There are some that do a pretty good job, but just raise their expenses on you like crazy. So really have to be aware of that. And you will impress your leaders in the organization when you show up and you've done that analysis. So if the CIO or director asks you which SOC, Security Operations Center, should we go look at, when you come back and you've done the analysis here that I've showed, where you show the comparisons, you show the quality rankings, you show the total cost of ownership, and why this maintenance is going to be cheaper on this solution versus another, that's pretty darn impressive. A lot of times when I ask those things to my teams, somebody will come back, there'll be a little note or two about why they like Cisco better than Arctic Wolf, or why they like Microsoft better than Azure. But if you come back and you've done that in-depth analysis, you're going to blow people away, and that's going to be a career accelerator for you. All right, so our board, we sort of corrected the path from going from Cerner, which would not have been a good decision for us, to going on to Epic. Had gotten that feedback from the board. The organization was really pumped to go on to Epic. Our board was happy that we averted that potentially poor choice. And so we have an organization in Seattle that recognizes CIOs of the year. So there's a Chief Information Officer of the year, and essentially your leadership team has the ability to nominate you. And so there were just about 180 CIOs nominated across Washington. And along the way of this journey, I ended up winning the CIO of the year. I'll share a couple pictures here. But I really, I gave a speech at this event, and I told my team, my leadership team over and over again, this was really an acknowledgement of our team and our ability. These folks, some of these folks are in security that you see. That's actually my CISO next to me on my left shoulder. We collectively as a team went and did this analysis and put the work in to figure out what was the right direction. Objective ratings, comparisons, financials, things like that, the surveys. And so it was a big acknowledgement of the team that we were doing something pretty darn special. And so just wanted to highlight that as part of the journey. All right, so all that build up. So we talked about the very opening slide, the picture of the CEO and I there, and the CEO is signing the contract, and then the other side, it was the weary team at Go Live. And so this, I want to talk just a little bit about the Go Live and how this affected security and so many other things. So we ended up going live 13 months later, it's 5:14 a.m. So we had targeted, my clock was targeted for, I think it was 5:04 a.m. was supposed to be Go Live. We missed it by about 10 minutes. and then 13 months later, we missed it by 10 minutes, which was pretty cool. So let me hit the pictures real quick, and I'll talk about a couple of the bullets. So the picture on the top is one of our command centers. So we actually had two. This was our operational command center. So I had 510 consultants in at the health system. Some of the consultants were in this room here. So the ATE stands for at the elbow support. So we had folks doing abstraction, so typing. So if you were in the hospital at Go Live, you could get admitted. So let's say you had a car accident at 10 p.m. On that Saturday. Well, you came in on Cerner. If you got released at 5:15 a.m. the next day, your discharge instructions, your documentation printed out on Epic. So we had to transfer those patients that were being treated live on the fly. So that was some of the work being done there. And then the picture on the bottom, that's one of my directors, that's my Epic project director, and we're holding the Go Live clock there. We each end up sleeping in the hospital at different points just to be ready for this Go Live, because you're basically going 24/7. And then just quickly by the numbers. So mention the consultants that came in. We've redone about 110 contracts. So those of you who you're either doing them now at your organization, or you will, when you go to buy any security service, or even in some cases products, you end up signing contracts. And so having great people that understand how to negotiate those is key. We had to redo 160 of them. My leadership team was actually in a command center for a month straight, taking calls, leading the organization through calls every 4 hours to make sure we weren't having patient safety events or other things. As I mentioned, the sleeping bags, people sleeping around at the hospital to be ready for the next morning. Let's see, a couple of call outs. Yeah, and then again, 83 applications deployed. So this is of the Epic stack. So we end up going all in on Epic. We're able to deprovision hundreds of applications or data stores across the organization, which, thinking back to the slide where I showed the green screens and a lot of these antiquated technologies, Epic we have it hosted in a highly secure data center. It's modern technology, it's secured, which I'll talk about here in a moment, but that just elevated our security posture like crazy. All right, so I talked to my Chief Information Security Officer and asked him for a few of his thoughts on what it meant to go from the previous systems we were in, these on-premise systems, to going to hosted or onto Epic. And he just really talked about security and compliance more broadly. So if you're not aware of Epic, they're the largest electronic medical record company in the United States, and they've got an army of security professionals that are able to really lock down their systems. So he had highlighted some of the things around just their ability to aggregate security events and really understand when ransomware corporations essentially or nation states or others are launching attacks on electronic medical records. They have the horsepower to go and detect those and block them. They've got more in the way of digital trust assurance. They're able to do things that we just simply weren't. Like, we had set the goal to patch every system across the health system within 24 hours for criticals. They were able to do those sorts of things. So just much more robust infrastructure. Had security operations center, network operations center that they get staffed 24/7. So just so much more robust posture than we had. And then obviously around disaster recovery, where they've got the multiple data centers across the country. Okay, now I just highlighted a couple ones. I won't touch on all these, but these are just a few of the call-outs where Epic really went far and above the security that we had in-house. So to where they could essentially have privileged access works. They really locked down the different devices that could touch our systems. To where when you're running a hospital and you've got systems all over general patient care, it's very hard to just isolate your core data stores. And so Epic's able to do that. They're able to do things like file integrity monitoring. So basically looking for things where there are certain files that we know they should have certain formats, they should look in a certain way. So when that integrity is challenged, basically being able to call that out. All right, even a big one that really drew us to Epic and we were pretty excited about locking down our systems was the zone-based firewalls, or basically the micro-segmentation. So again, going back to where we were as a health system, we had systems spread throughout the place. So I showed all the on-premise systems. Those were often on the same networks as computers that were being used by end users and so forth. So not a lot of segmentation of networks, if you're familiar with those. So that was a huge call out. And then just their ability to monitor alerts for event logs. So looking at, if they saw anomalies in the tools, being able to detect those and then respond in quick fashion and have the talent and the coverage to be able to really remediate those sorts of things on short order. All right, so just a couple pieces. So two of the key issues we really had, so we had our one and only big data center was in our hospital building. So if there was ever a massive earthquake and it was damaged, we couldn't reconstitute elsewhere if our data center was severely damaged. So we were able to solve for that with this move, along with some of the business continuity systems that Epic brought into place. All right, I feel like that was a lot of talking. I'm going to close the slide just so I can see a little bit better. So, what questions do y'all have? And I couldn't see in the chat while I was talking because I was in full screen mode.
No, I didn't. Yeah, there wasn't that many, except a congratulations when you won the CIO of the year.
Oh, thank you much. Yeah.
Anybody have any specific questions? I know, again, Mr. Jason doesn't have a whole lot of time with us today. Again, just a big project like that, he could probably spend at least a week just disseminating that and breaking it down. But again, as we're talking about different aspects, it seems like the Epic solution itself came pretty secure, or with at least a lot of security functionalities with it. Did that drive any of the decision? Besides the cost, obviously cost is the ultimate decider, but again, was that one of the areas that you think would helped with your decision?
Oh, 100%. So thinking back, I mean, that's why I put in some of those slides around, like, here we are, we're on the verge of 2024, and ransomware has subsided a bit now. We're starting to make progress in that space. But that period of time, I mean, so John down at Sky Lakes, he's telling me about, like, minute by minute about his whole health system shutting down. And we're all on premise. So the board and the leadership team had said, okay, we're staying on server, we're staying on premise. I'm like, all right, well, where does that leave us? I'm looking at my friend John, who just got his whole health system shut down. And thinking, in part, it's the financials, it's everything, but security. So, legacy systems, green screens, inadequate network segmentation. So when you think about Epic and their hosted environment, what was so attractive there was you can take the electronic medical record, the financials, the data warehouse is all within Epic. You can put it in a safe, essentially, which is Epic hosted, and you can just open up a couple doors. You say, okay, we need to, from these points, we need to log into the medical record system. Those are very narrow roads to guard. The medical record system at Evergreen Health sat in a big, basically, freeway with all the on-ramps that you see. That, I mean, there's a million roads going in now, and there's some homeless people camping next to the medical record. There's no segmentation, there's no protection. It's sort of...
It's very, very open. So basically, any user could have access to things that they probably shouldn't be touching with, dealing with at all.
For the most, my CISO would say, "Oh no, Jason, we had some antivirus, and maybe we had a firewall here or there." But yeah, it was what they call flat network. So it was you're sitting on a computer in a medical waiting room. You could, if you knew enough, you could send a ping over to some server that's supporting the medical record system. Whereas in Epic, you bundle it up, you put it in a finite area, and you lock it down like crazy. So yeah, that was absolutely one of the key drivers from my perspective. But you also, think about how you're going to sell an initiative. So I can't just say, "Hey, board, I know this is $70 million more than you want to spend, but we're going to be secure, and I'm going to sleep better at night. So can I have the money?"
Right. So the scare tactics isn't necessarily going to work. Like, all these other people are getting ransomware, and we're going to get ransomware. That's not going to fly.
Yeah, they're going to say, "Well, do a better job protecting it." Here's the $70 million. Here's $10. You'll figure it. Make it enough. But,
right, looks like we have another question. Before we can go back to the previous slides, but we'll answer the other question. What can patients do to protect themselves from a cyber attack?
Oh, for sure. So there are a few things. So the one, we had a number of partners back in those days that were getting ransomware. They were on that 24 million records that had been stolen or shared inadvertently. So they were often going to clinics, to medical systems that they were not adequately protected. So one of the things to understand, if you've got sensitive information, if you just generally want to be an educated shopper, you want to have some base understanding of the health systems you're dealing with. How are they storing your data? So we had in our health system, we had physicians that didn't work for us, but they would round at the hospital. They were called attending. They were on a medical record system that was hosted that just shut down one day out of nowhere. Last I heard, they never got access to it. But that's just patient safety issues. Who knows where that data is now? So have a general understanding. You wouldn't put your money in a bank that had they didn't use encryption and transit or some of those things. You generally ask a few questions. So you just want to be an educated shopper or consumer and be leery of dealing with organizations that don't have basic marketing materials on the website around how they protect your information and things like that. If you're much deeper into that, like if you're very concerned, you might ask some questions of the organization. You can, the 1-800 number type things or call centers you can call into that ask how are you protecting these data?
Do organizations like Evergreen Health ever host kind of awareness programs for patients, or have you seen anything like that in your particular industry? And because you see like banks will do something similar with they'll send out things about fraud. Be careful of these fraudulent emails when they hear about them. So banks will alert their customers. Does the medical industry do anything similar for any of this?
It's much less widespread than the financial industry and some of the industries where they're really trying to sell you and get your business. Healthcare has just been a little stodgier. Unfortunately, in U.S. healthcare, when you hear from your provider about it, it's you're opening up the letter that says your information has been breached. That's quite common. So I've gotten letters from colleges I've attended. I've gotten letters from healthcare entities where I've gotten a checkup from. That you open the mail and it's the fifth one in 2 years you've read that says your data's breached again. So that, unfortunately, that's kind of the state of the union in terms of where healthcare is at, and they're back on their heels. So they're playing defense. They're basically just trying everything they can to not get breached, and then they get breached and they send out the letters. So that was part of the big move to Epic is we were that little battleship on the slide where the bombs were hitting around it. You can't. You're trying to not have a bomb land on you. You're not doing like proactive education to the users. You're dodging bombs like the Matrix or something. You're really just trying not to get hit. So that was part of the move and say, okay, if we actually bundle this up, give it over to Epic, can they really run with that? And then we can start to be proactive with things like engaging patients.
Great. So maybe can you bring up your last slide again? I don't know which one you were referring to, huh?
Yeah, I think it was...
Was it just the last security slide? It wasn't the thank you slide?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it was probably I think it was some of these. So this was the last one I showed, I believe, around business continuity and data centers.
Was that the one you were talking about, huh? Yeah, we haven't talked about this too much because usually disaster recovery usually comes at the very end of every security course. And unfortunately, usually they always talk about it at the very end. But again, usually once you talk about incident response and business continuity, disaster recovery definitely comes into play.
Yeah, it is pretty critical, especially when you think about it, if you're a health system. Like, it's one thing, I gave the example, if you've got your pregnant wife and you're racing to the hospital and you get there and they can't look up what blood type you are in case they have to get blood during birth. It's one thing to say, okay, we lost your financial data, you're protected by insurance, you're going to get the check. That's like one level of scrutiny on disaster recovery. The other is you show up, you're allergic to penicillin, you got in a bike accident, you're unconscious. We don't know that any longer. We don't know you're definitely allergic to this thing or that. And so how do we treat you? It's a whole other level of scrutiny and rigor that you have to put in to protect these kind of systems.
Well, I mean, it just adds, more of the physical danger rather than the abstract system getting brought down. You lose your data. It sucks. But whereas if anything happens in medical institutions, that could have actual grave bodily harm and things. So.
Oh yes. Yep.
Okay, it looks like they're good. Does anybody have any other questions? We have looks like 3 or 4 minutes left. Let's see, assuming hospital uses one of these systems, if we get attacked and there's a loss of money and data, would these companies provide reimbursement?
Yeah, almost never. So they do not by their own charity or goodwill. So normally when there's a financial reimbursement, that's because a bunch of patients got together, and in the U.S. it's called a class action lawsuit. So basically, you have a massive data breach, 500,000 patients got their records breached. Well, a lawyer reads that on the newspaper and starts sending letters to those 500 people, or 500,000 people, and say, hey, come on board, we're all going to sue this place. So that's really the only way financial reimbursement's given. However, in the U.S., there are rules around when you have a breach like that, you have to pay for identity protection. So you can enroll, you send a letter to those 500,000 patients. You say, we're going to pay $99.99 per year for the next 3 years to pay for identity protection and fraud protection. So your bank account, your name and date of birth is used to go buy Josh a car. They're gonna, because that name's on protection, it's gonna fire an alert and in theory protect you.
Looks like another one. Has Epic been widely implemented in, I guess, healthcare organizations around the U.S.? I think your slide showed that 104 implemented it. I don't know if that's, most of the U.S.
Oh, yeah. That was just 104 during that little period of time. I think that was a 12 or maybe 18-month window. So it's extremely ubiquitous. So everywhere, it's the #1 health system. Cerner was the #2, but falling. So it's most health systems are either on Epic or Cerner at this point, with most shifting to Epic.
All right. Any other questions? I think that's about it. We've got about a minute left. So again, thank you to all our participants who joined to this wonderful guest speaker, Jason Wood. Thank you, Mr. Jason Wood, for taking the time out of your busy schedule and wherever you're located. And
oh yeah, happy to do it for sure. Yeah, I'm heading down to California in a couple days, up in the Pacific Northwest for now.
Good. All right. Well, again, thank you so much. Thanks to everybody that watched this. And again, if you have any other questions, you can pass them on to me, and I can pass them on to Jason. Or again, you can find Jason on LinkedIn. But again, I don't know how quickly he'll respond. He's a busy guy. So again, feel free to reach out to me, and then I can see if we can ask some more questions. But again, thanks for giving us a good overview of some medical tech from the U.S. and all the security posturing there.
Okay, yeah, happy to do it. And yeah, I'd say final words are, maybe you're not implementing an EMR, or maybe you're not currently in the CIO role or so forth, or CISO role. But yeah, just hopefully you take a few lessons from just how my team, myself, I looked at these big decisions and implement those, and maybe some of the smaller decisions, and you will get a ton of kudos or great feedback from the leaders that see that you put the rigor into those decisions.
Yep. So again, there's a lot of analysis. As much as we want to think that all we can do is code all day or implement tools all day, be very technical, again, there is a business side to every technical role. So again, it is a very important aspect. Okay. Well, thank you, Jason. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening.